Hello Clarkston, welcome back to Real Learning. This is an opportunity for us to share with you the excellent things that are happening in our classrooms every single day. As you can see, I am seated at a dining room table. The reason for this is to represent the power and necessity of dinner table conversations among families. In a recent book entitled Reclaiming Conversation, author Sherry Turkle stated that we can predict the level of success a student will have in school and in life based upon the number of times she or he had family dinners. It is at the dinner table with people who love each other that kids can look their siblings and parents in the eyes, listen to their voices, and develop empathy. Here, it is safe for children and adults to try out ideas, share their fears, and truly understand one another. It is my hope that each of Clarkston's 8,000 students has dinner with his or her family multiple times each week. I hope that families will make these cell phone free zones so that real listening can take place. Our second guest on Real Learning is Mrs. Amy Hohlbein, who is a world language teacher and Cultures of Thinking liaison at Clarkston High School. Welcome, Amy.
Good morning.
Amy, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, as you said, I'm a teacher here at Clarkston High School. I teach Spanish. I've been here for 13 years teaching in Clarkston. I also live in the Clarkston School District, and I have 3 kids who go to school at Independence Elementary. I'm also fortunate enough this year to be one of the 2 Cultures of Thinking liaisons at Clarkston High School. So I am able to work with other teachers at the school, in the district, in the county, and all over the world.
That's awesome, Amy. We really appreciate all the great things that you do. So will you tell us a little bit about your philosophy of teaching and how you arrived at this philosophy?
Sure. I think my teaching philosophy is constantly changing. It evolves over time. When I think of the philosophy I had 13 years ago when I started teaching, it's much different than today. At first, my teaching philosophy was centered mostly around the content, and I loved and was inspired so much by the Spanish language that I wanted those same experiences for my own students. I focused a lot on the content. I used the teaching methods that I had learned to help my students grow as Spanish speakers, and I still very much believe that the content is important in my classroom. However, I realize now that my role in the classroom is much more than just delivering content. I believe that as educators, we must work to develop dispositions in our students that will help them be critical thinkers, independent learners, and innovators, so they can become adults who persist despite the challenges that they will inevitably face.
That's wonderful to think about those dispositions and how important they are to carry all through life, not just in the classroom. So what does this philosophy look like in your classroom?
In my classroom, I want my students to, I want you to be able to walk into my classroom and feel what's taking place. I don't want you to just see what's happening. So I've worked to create a unique environment in my classroom. I try to make a learning culture that has been based on the training that we've had over the past 5 years with Ron Richart. In his latest book, Creating Cultures of Thinking, he talks about 8 cultural forces, and I have reflected on each one of those and tried to make those a part of my classroom. I set expectations for my students that focus more on their growth and their proficiency in Spanish. I want them to become Spanish communicators. I try to steer away from expectations that are related to how many times someone can leave and go to the restroom, or how they behave in class. I want them to be engaged. So I try to promote learning rather than artificial comments such as good job. I want to give real feedback on their understanding and on their learning. I value my students. I want them to know that their thinking is valued. I provide time and opportunities in my classroom for students to think. I want them to struggle. I provide time for them to struggle. And I want them to develop their own solutions on what to do when they do struggle and when they face challenges. Many of the opportunities that I provide are in the form of thinking routines, which are designed to elicit specific types of thinking. My classroom environment encourages students to interact with each other, to interact with me. I want them to question each other, engage with each other. I want them to learn from me, but also I want to learn from them in my classroom. I try to model the dispositions that I'm trying to teach and trying to develop in my students. I try to be deliberate, but I try to be flexible with them so that they can have real, authentic learning experiences.
It's really great to hear you talk so much about kids and how you observe them and learn from them and with them. So what evidence do you see and hear from your students that helps you know that they are learning?
Over time, I'm able to notice evidence of learning in my students, and sometimes it's not from one day to the next. It takes a while, especially in developing language proficiency. But I do notice that my students, they change their language when they speak to each other. And I notice when they become more comfortable with taking risks in class, that they are learning. They are in a safe environment. They feel safe to try things. And I ask students to document their thinking so I can actually see it. And to me, that is evidence of their learning and of their growth also. It's very nice when I receive feedback from students who have graduated and they've gone on to still study the language, and they tell me that they were prepared for their college courses and that they did make connections to the real world. And to me, that is evidence of growth and learning.
That's one of the things that I appreciate very much about you, Amy, and something we've talked about previously on the show is that I see you out in the community and having lunch with your former graduates, kids who are away at college, and supporting them. And I don't know that everybody realizes all of the time and effort that our teachers put in, not just in school, but continuing those relationships when our kids go on, and how much we continue to care about them and want the best for them. So thank you for doing that as well.
You're welcome.
So how do you know that kids know that you believe in them?
First of all, I have to know that I believe in my kids, and so that's number one. But I tell my students I believe in them. I tell them on the very first day of class, I believe in you. I know that you'll be successful in this class. It's possible to be successful. So I communicate that to them. However, they are teenagers, and I think you have to also walk the walk. You have to be real with the students. So I work very deliberately on establishing those relationships with my students. I don't want them to just hear me say it. I want them to feel it when they walk into class. I pay attention to them. I try to learn about their personal lives. I try to learn about what they're interested in so that I can engage them in class. And when they start taking risks and they ask questions and they accept the challenges that we have in class willingly, I know that they know that I believe in them. And there's a level of mutual trust and belief in each other in my classroom.
And I know that you take a lot of time outside of the classroom too, and things like NHS and other areas of students' lives that are important to them beyond school.
Yes.
So how do you know that students feel powerful in your classroom?
I provide students with a lot of opportunities to customize their learning. I give choices. I try to have them be creative. I try not to give them rubrics that are so stifling that they have to just do A, B, and C. I really want them to go where it makes sense for them to go so they can really truly understand and connect to the content. I give them chances to direct their own learning so that they're engaged. I don't want my students to be miserable in school, and so we try to work together to make it enjoyable and authentic. And I think when students see where their own efforts take them, they're naturally more powerful, and they become inspired and they keep going, they persist.
That feedback that they get on their own learning and their own choices. So do you have one story that exemplifies your belief in children?
I do have one story. When I started teaching 13 years ago, for a couple of years I had a student, his name was Josh, and I could tell right away that he wasn't very engaged with the content itself in my class. Although he and I had a great relationship, I would notice while I was teaching, he was very bored. He was miserable in class. Just the look on his face was that he didn't want to be there. But outside of class, we had rich conversations. And one thing that I found out about him was that he was really into paintball. He loved paintball, and he was so excited. He lit up when he talked about it. And so he had invited me a couple of times to go to a paintball tournament with him. and to see him play. And at the time, I knew nothing about paintball. I didn't know that paintball tournaments last all day, or really what went on. But I went. I remember I went to Walled Lake to a paintball tournament, and I just watched him, and he was so excited that at that moment in class, things started to change for him. It was almost like he knew that I believed in him, and he knew that I cared about him as a person, not just as a learner of Spanish. And so he became much more engaged in the class, and he graduated, and over time we lost contact. But last year I received randomly in the mail at school a letter from his mom, and she wrote in there what an impact it made that I had gone to the paintball tournament. We made this connection, and this boy who was just not engaged or very involved in the traditional model of school is now a surgeon. And so he's very successful. And so for me, that shows that there is something, and it might not click in the environment or in the 1 year that you have a student, but if you can encourage them and you can show them that it's possible if they just stay determined, then they will succeed, and they'll persevere, and they'll meet their goals at some point. So super proud of Josh.
So great to get that feedback and to have those connections, and just to know that those little moments make such a huge difference in the lives of our kids.
Right.
That's wonderful. So Amy, if you could change anything in education, what would it be and why?
I think it depends on the day, and I think we both know there are a lot of things that need to be changed with education, but I remember, Rod, when you first came to the district, you kept saying education is not broken, and that stuck with me, because I think that there are parts of education that need restructured. We need to shift, we need to think ahead about where we're going. But we also need to look at what we are doing, and I think we need to celebrate what is happening right now. We need to talk about the good things that are happening and already are happening. I think we need to celebrate each child as an individual and celebrate all of their successes, even if they're not the ones, the high test scores or the things that somebody at some time said were indicators of success. And so things like this that we're doing today, sharing out with the community and just letting them know what's going on in our classrooms is huge. That would be a definite change to make, is just celebrating what is going on now. So
celebrating and even broadening that definition of what success means and what achievement means.
Absolutely.
That's a wonderful thought. I agree. Amy, I truly believe that there's nothing more powerful in education than a teacher who can articulate a clear philosophy of teaching and learning, and then walk into that teacher's classroom and feel that philosophy in action. And I want to thank you for believing so strongly in children, and for reeling them into learning, and for sharing the awesome things that you do in your classroom. I really think that Clarkston is very fortunate to have you teaching here. So thank you for all that you do.
Thank you.
I want to thank our community for tuning into this show. I hope that at dinner tonight as a family, your children will enthusiastically recall their experiences from school, that you will ask them questions about their experiences, and that you'll enjoy your precious time together. Thanks again to Amy Hohlbein for sharing her awesomeness with us. I look forward to seeing you soon.